Oh, it shows up backwards. Hmm.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started. I think we have over 40 registered, so we might have some people dropping in as we go along here, but just wanted to welcome everyone to one of our April Be Local PDX learning events. We're really excited to be able to continue offering events virtually, so thanks everyone for joining us. I'm Rose Lavelle. I'm the learning chair on the Be Local PDX board. We are doing events. We have our monthly learning event that we usually do, but we're adding more events as they seem relevant in the time that we're in. And so if you have any ideas for events or you'd like to speak at events, I'm the person you want to speak to. I'll go ahead and drop some links in the chat, how to sign up for a newsletter, how to do a request for proposal for this for doing topics. Today we have Shawn Busse, the CEO of Kinesis, with us to cover how to position your business for success through an economic downturn. Before we hand it over, I just wanted to mention a few things. Please mute your microphones on your computers or your telephones when you're not speaking. It will just help us all hear better. Please use the chat if you have any questions or issues. We will have a few times throughout the presentation for Q&A, so you can save your questions until then or put them in the chat as you think of them, and I'll help call them out to Shawn. We're scheduled until about 1:30 today, so if you're not able to stay for the whole time, stay tuned till early next week. I'll go ahead and put the recording and the slide deck on our website for later viewing. And I think that's all from me. So Shawn, if you're ready, take it away.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Rose. Appreciate you organizing this and getting the invite out so quickly. You know, Rose and I were talking 2 weeks ago. I mean, it's not very long. And, you know, essentially I was like, look, things are moving really fast. We've been studying recessions and presenting on recessions for probably 2-3 years now. And I think it's important that even if my presentation isn't amazing and perfect, and I've only done a few Zoom presentations, that we get the information out to folks sooner rather than later. So we just put this thing together in a heartbeat. And so hopefully y'all will leave with some ideas and strategies you can take back to your businesses or those that you advise in the business ecosystem, and just really start to put some things in place. You know, I think, oh gosh, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was this stunning headline around, 6 million people unemployed. And, now the stunning headline is getting closer to like 16 million, 20 million. And so this is just moving super, super fast. And what I've observed is those who are able to move quickly and respond quickly are usually in a better place than those who are a little bit paralyzed. My goal here is to give you all as much help as I can, and in as quick a time as I can, that you can bring to your organizations. Nice to see a lot of friendly faces. Kerwin, Kel, David, all of you all, and all those other folks. And then the non-video participants, good to have you on the line too. Hopefully you can see everything. If you could, if you have questions, shoot those over to Rose, and I think she can help aggregate them and put them in at the right time. I have a slide at the end, or sort of towards the end, where we can collect all of them, although we can stop partway through if that helps as well. So why don't we just get into it here. All right. Just a thumbs up, you can see the hello. All right, great, thank you. All right, so I'll share my financials from 2005 to 2007. Very simplified, of course, but we've been in Kinesis. My company has been in business for 20 years this January, and we had a really great run in the 2005 to 2007 range, as I think a lot of companies did. So we've been around, for a few years, figured a few things out, and we're starting to gain some momentum. Then this thing happened, and it was, most of us felt the impact of that recession. At the time, it was called the Great Recession. I don't know what we're going to call this next one, but it's going to be awfully great too, probably not in a great way. So, kind of just for perspective, in a year's time, the country lost about 7 million jobs. And that was a really powerful statistic when I would show this slide deck for the last 2 years. Folks would be like, yeah, wow, that was really brutal. I just looked on CNN today, and it's actually, we're at 22 million applications for unemployment as of today. So just for perspective, we all thought the Great Recession was terrible and awful, and it was. We lost 7 million jobs in a year. We've lost at least 22 million jobs in 4 weeks. So I know, there's sort of two camps I've seen out there. One is everything is going to rebound and we'll get past this. And I hope that those folks are right. And I think it's wise to plan for if they're not right. And once we sort of deal with the fact that there's a pandemic and that piece, we're going to have to deal with the economic fallout of it. And I think the good news is the government is throwing a lot of money at the problem. The PPP program, I don't know, maybe if we could just see a show of hands. I don't know if I could see how many people I can get on screen here. Who here has applied for the PPP? I know not all of you are eligible for it. Has anyone received funds for the PPP? Okay. We've supposedly been approved, but I think that program has illustrated, how hard it is to get a lot of money into the system quickly. Even those $1,200 stimulus checks, they're having a hard time getting those out. People are having a hard time filing for unemployment. So even with the best of intentions, we're going to have a pretty significant lag financially. So to continue on, these were our financials in 2010. It really was like somebody flipped off a switch in January of 2010, and like almost overnight, we went from being a going concern to having almost no revenue. I was in a weird position in that our business had a lot of projects and so forth kind of in the funnel, and those kind of came to an end and then didn't really have any new work on the other side of it. And I really failed to anticipate how little buying was being done even later in the recession. And I think there's some parallels to today in terms of how, kind of quickly this is impacting a lot of businesses. So thinking about a recession and this idea of what can you do about a recession? And I went through this deck, which I've been giving now for a couple of years. And the whole idea for the last 2 years was to help people prepare for a recession. And so you'll see a couple of areas where I've like crossed out words that were from that old deck, right? How do we position our business to emerge strong from the next downturn? And it's really, how do we position it to emerge strong from the downturn? And I think one of the key ideas here is that you can't control the market. The one thing you can do is you can control how you respond to it. And in an ideal situation, you've done things in good times to help you prepare for that response. A lot of folks are going to be caught very flat-footed. However, it's never too late to start. And I think that a lot of these ideas, yeah, sure, in a perfect world, we've been working on this for the last 5 years. But there is still no better time than to just get going. So my first recession, 1979, 1980, rocking the plaid pants with my brother in Roseburg, Oregon. Actually was born here. Since then, I don't know, the business has been through, let's see, 2000, 2008, the 9/11, so 3 recessions and downturns in its existence. My dad, who's a lifelong entrepreneur, we grew up in a small business. He made stuff, you know, he was a realtor, and he would build houses and that kind of stuff. We had 3 businesses. You know, I still don't really understand the vertical integration of real estate, motorcycles, and hot dog restaurants, but those were his businesses that we grew up, you know, sort of enjoying eating hot dogs and hanging out in the motorcycle showroom. And like many businesses today, 1980 came around, and what happened was the federal government, in an attempt to control inflation, jacked up interest rates, you know, to the realm of, you know, 18, 19% if you wanted to buy a home. So you can imagine how many people bought houses from his real estate business when interest rates were at 18%. Similarly, you don't buy motorcycles and jet skis, which also require loans usually, and most people are eating in. So pretty much overnight, our whole family went from being really prosperous and enjoying kind of the benefits of being a semi-successful business to, you know, really bankruptcy. And I didn't really realize that as a kid because my parents sheltered us from a lot of it, but it's, you know, it's really a tale of, you know, everything seems to be going well, and then you realize you don't have what it takes to get through it. And so I think I've had this, you know, sort of obsession with recessions and building vital small businesses, you know, even since I was a kid. And so, you know, my crazy thing is like, oh, let's follow in my dad's footsteps and build a business too. Except we're not going to do hot dogs and motorcycles or real estate. So what we've built at Kinesis is a business to help small businesses. So our clients are, you know, privately held businesses. Some of them are B Corp, some of them are not. All of them have owners that, you know, really care about their employees, and they generally care about their communities. And so our mission in life is to help those businesses grow and thrive, and to be, you know, vibrant and durable, and to not experience these kinds of events. I will say that one of the cool things about the last recession is it was an awesome opportunity to examine what we did as a business. And we used that recession as an opportunity to really rebuild the company. And so in 2010, it was sort of the bottom of the bottom. And coming out of that, rebuilding the company to really focus on thriving small businesses and helping them grow and be durable. We've had just a great run for even, you know, past 2014 when I first put this graph together, all the way to today. Had, I don't know what, probably a decade worth of profitable growth, and, you know, paid off all of our debts back in 2014, and have been running without, you know, all those kinds of things. So the question I used to ask is, you know, if I face another 2008, what will I have done? And so the new version of this sentence is, when I face another 2008, when I face another, you know, kind of global recession, you know, what will I have done differently about that? And, you know, to kind of help with this idea, we've identified that there are really 3 really challenging things that businesses face, even in good times, that get made much more difficult by a recession. And the idea here is that the recessions, they aggravate these wicked problems. And, you know, these wicked problems, you know, they fall into 3 camps. So camp number 1 is what we call everybody has a Makino. So what this wicked problem is about is it's really everybody has sort of the same thing. And what a Makino is in the precision machining industry. So they make lots of really accurate small parts. There's a tool called a Makino, and it's a machining cell. It's very, very expensive. You know, it's $1 million as a starting price. And it can make parts faster and more remarkably than you've ever seen. If I was a machine shop, I was a small machine shop, and I could buy a Makino 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I could win every bit of business I wanted with that thing because I could make things faster, more cheaply, more accurately than every single business out there. Now, the problem is that the Makino Corporation, they're in the business of selling these machines to machine shops. So I might be the only one to have one for a while, but then eventually my competitor down the road buys one, and then the one up the street buys one, and the one down the way buys one. Pretty soon, everybody's got this Makino. And so the wicked problem of having a Makino is that it produces margin compression. So when there's no visible distinction between businesses that have the same solution, then you start to get into margin compression because you're being compared on price. And that, what was once awesome about our company is now actually a liability to that company. So if in good times, you know, we're taking lots of work in, but we're not actually making a lot of money on it because we're effectively offering the same thing as our competitors, this gets much, much harder in bad times because buyers now start to look to buy on price. So that first idea is really similar offerings, hard to differentiate, and so you're being purchased on price. And when a recession comes, not only does the volume go down, but the purchasers now start to get more and more aggressive about reducing what they pay for things. And so anytime I say to somebody, you know, hey, you've got the Makino problem, it means that they're having a hard time differentiating from their competition. Second wicked problem is the disengaged workforce. So, you know, crazy thing, 2 months ago, we had what, 3%, 4% unemployment, and employers were having a really hard time getting candidates in the door, keeping great people. You would see folks, you know, getting into kind of bidding wars for salaries to keep people. And so, you know, even in good times, having a purpose-driven workforce and a group of people who really care about the companies that they work for can be challenging. There's some statistics out there that show that, you know, roughly only about a third of workers are actually highly engaged in their jobs. I would be willing to bet that that statistic is more favorable for this audience, since B Corps tend to be more purpose-driven and more connected to mission and vision. But you know, again, the hard part about a recession is that when you have employees that are disengaged in good times, often they become a bit of a liability in bad times. And I use an example of that. There's a business, you know, I'm gonna anonymize them for the purpose of this conversation. You know, they had an employee who, as they started to reflect on it, even for the last couple of years, has been kind of the naysayer employee. And now that things are getting much, much harder for that business, they're actually having to ask more of their employees now than ever before, right? We're asking our employees to work remotely. We're asking our employees to work while raising kids. We're asking our employees to, you know, probably in many cases service our customers even better than before so we don't lose them. And so do you think that that employee now raises their hand and says, yes, I will do whatever it takes to help this company? Unfortunately, they're the ones who aren't really willing to put their oar in the water and row with everybody else. And it can be really, really challenging when times get hard and you have disengaged workers. Ironically, even though maybe you would think their attitude would be, well, I'm lucky to have a job, you know, a lot of times it becomes questioning leadership, and, you know, all these kind of sort of negative behaviors. So what I've seen happen is as companies have gotten under stress, when they have a challenging culture or a culture that has some bad actors in it, things get harder. The last problem, which is, I would say, probably one of the hardest ones to solve in a recession, is the 800-pound gorilla problem. So what that is when you have a customer that's providing more than, say, 20% of your income. So you have a big client. In good times, you end up serving them like crazy because they're just throwing money at you. But then you look up one day and you realize that if they go away, you're in big trouble. So problem number 3 is essentially a concentration risk problem. I see this a lot in the professional services realm, where you've got, let's say you're a creative firm and you do work for Nike. And Nike is a very demanding client. They ask a lot of their vendors. And one day you look up and 80% of your revenue is coming from Nike. And the concentration risk problem is particularly hard in a recession because companies like Nike and Intel and Adidas, it's on and on and on, they tend to not have a ton of loyalty to small businesses. And so you run into the problem of one day you look up and now you've lost, half of your revenue. And I'm sure some folks here have been in that situation before. And then there's other challenges, that are made worse by recession. So things like debt, generational turnover. So leaders that are getting ready to retire, and maybe there's not a new leadership team behind them. Technology shortfalls, like, a good example of that is the state of Oregon's been looking to replace their unemployment technology for like 20 years and hasn't. And so now when they need that technology to work, and it's under the most stress they've ever seen, it's failing. And so now you've got, tens, hundreds of thousands of Oregonians trying desperately to get money to, pay their rent and put food on the table, and the technology is totally failing them. Now, if times were good, those things that you just get kicked down the road, kicked down the road, kicked down the road. Another example of that is, maybe you don't have the most secure technology and IT ecosystem in your company, but because you have 4 walls and you're all, contained within those 4 walls, the threat to your security is relatively low. Now everybody's going home and they're trying to tie into the system at work, which now creates a whole nother layer of security challenge and risk to the organization. So hopefully I've really inspired you with all these potential problems, and we will get to some good things here, I promise. I just want to get the bad stuff out of the way so you can understand kind of what forces are at work. And I do have some awesome inspiration for you. So what's possible here? So shifting to this idea, instead of being bought on price, we can protect or expand our margins. How can we do that? We can actually work on energizing the team. I found that, I don't know how many of you have experienced this, but stressors can sometimes be things that actually bring people together in really powerful ways. We're all facing this same shared grief, right? And being able to talk about that and coming together to support one another can be a real moment of energy, even amongst all the challenges we're facing. So we can energize our teams, and we can build our customer base to be more vibrant and sustainable. And what's exciting about these ideas is that if we can do this going through a recession, it positions our businesses to do well and to be successful on the other side of the recession. So looking at what success looks like, we've been studying past recessions to understand what is a successful strategy going through future recessions. One of my favorite projects is a report that I'll be happy to share with y'all that was done by the Harvard Business Review called Roaring Out of a Recession. And it analyzed multiple recessions, multiple companies, and across different strategies that these companies employed. And what was really interesting is the lack of, one singular tactic that helped these companies thrive. And what's also interesting is that a very, very small set of businesses, less than 1 in 10, actually came out of a recession and were able to flourish afterwards. So they looked really hard at these businesses to understand, well, why did 1 in 10 actually do better financially and from a growth perspective as they came out of this recession? Was there any one thing? And there wasn't actually any one thing, but there was a combination of things that were a combination of conservative strategies, but also proactive strategies. So a conservative strategy would be reducing costs. A proactive strategy would be investing in R&D, investing in sales and marketing, maybe hiring people when you would think you would be cutting back on staff. And so, looking at that survey, they put together a combination of things, not just any one thing. And I think the most important thing that came out of this piece was that there were 3 areas that generally the winners didn't hack, or if they did cut them back, these were the last things that they cut back. And so those areas were research and development. I would put that under kind of the umbrella of innovation. So they continued to invest financially with people. They continued to invest in their company in terms of innovation and change. They didn't cut that back. They continued to invest in sales and marketing. There's a lot of statistics on past recessions of people investing in sales and marketing in the recession, and you're going to hear all the sales and marketing people tell you now's the right time to spend on sales and marketing. But it isn't just you throw money at that, actually. You do it in a very strategic, thoughtful way. And part of the reason for that is that the market gets a lot less noisy as your competition sort of retreats. And then the last piece is they didn't cut their people, or if they cut their people, it was one of the last things they cut. There's another project I'll share with you, which is about strategies for reducing teams in ways that actually leave the company much more healthy versus traditional strategies of cutting teams. And that's sort of outside the bounds of this presentation, but there's a pretty important project around that talks about the idea of furloughs and salary reductions and other strategies besides just, hey, we fired 20% of our workforce, which is kind of typical big corporate America approach. So I've got that research too, and I'll share that with you. One other thing is that family businesses tended to outperform non-family businesses in recessions. And the thinking on that is that, the thing about family is that when times get tough, you're willing to sacrifice for one another. And I think there's a real commonality between that idea and businesses that are purpose-driven and are willing to where the employees are willing to sacrifice for one another, where the leaders are willing to sacrifice for their employees. So, I put that as a little pin in this research of thinking about, well, why would a family-run business do better than a non-family-run business? So the last idea here is that you, as a company, you examine the successful companies examined every aspect of their business and reduced operating costs, often on a permanent basis, in areas that they would discover actually weren't adding value into the company. So not marketing, R&D, innovation, people, but other areas. So for example, we have this fancy phone system at work. It's nice and everything, but we aren't using it whatsoever. And we're suddenly realizing, well, maybe we don't need it. And we're like, Zoom is a fraction of the price and provides an video interface. And, so those kinds of things, those are the kinds of costs that I'm talking about where is this something that is fundamentally important to how you run your business, or is it a habit that you've built around spending on something? And maybe there's actually a way to be more innovative and thoughtful of how you accomplish the same thing. One of the things I hope you leave with today is this idea of a mind shift. So you're going to see, I think, in the coming weeks and months, lots of webinars and seminars on like 10 things you need to do in a recession to make your company awesome, or 3 ways you can cut costs, or blah, 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 blah. Very, very tactical. So the idea that I'd like to leave you with is just a different way to think about your business, because the stuff that you do with your business is going to be different than the stuff I do with my business, is the stuff that Cassandra does with her business, or Kel does with her business, or on and on and on and on. So I'm not going to, assume I know enough to tell you what to do, but I am going to try to help you think in different ways that have been helpful to others as well as myself, that may, spawn off new ways of thinking. So first idea, when I talked about margin compression and having your competitors sell on the same things that you sell on. And again, this won't be a problem for everybody in this room. This is sort of like a buffet here. I think you can go, oh yeah, that's my problem. I'll listen to that, and that, oh, that's not my problem. But if you have a margin compression problem, if you have a problem selling in a way that makes your buyers go, oh my gosh, I don't think I could find that anywhere else. I think, Scout Books is a great example, right? I don't know too many people who are making tiny little books in like handmade presses, and they're pretty remarkable. But not everybody's got something that's remarkable. So thinking about margin compression, the opportunity I think here is, to shift our mind from we know what our customers want and we fulfill our needs, which is super common. It's a super common mindset. So like, what if the idea could be something more like, we're curious about what our customers value, and we're going to share a vision for what the future could look like. And the idea here is often that customers may not know what the solution looks like. They value something, but they don't always know what it is that's going to solve their need. And, I think about this over and over again in my own experience. For years and years and years, businesses would come to us and say, hey, we need you to build us a website. And for many years, I would say, okay, we'll build you a website. And I thought that's what they needed. But actually, many times what they needed was a better offering, or they needed the ability to talk about their product in an awesome way, or they needed a new type of customer. None of those things are websites. And so thinking through the lens of what would your customer value, even if they don't know how to express it. And so here's a really great example of that. So if y'all are old enough to remember Yahoo website, the design of the Yahoo website, and how the mindset of those early search engines, whether it was, Internet Explorer, search engine, Bing, or whatever, was the idea was, well, if customers want to find something, they need to find even more. They want to find more things. And so pretty soon, search engines became this place of like everything, well, gosh, if you want to look for information on the Trailblazers, then certainly you want to look up, your 401k information or mortgage rates or all these sort of things. And so we just keep shoving more and more information into the user's experience. And then, everybody's following each other, right? Everybody was building websites that look like this. And then along comes a new idea, which was saying, like, actually, maybe we should just answer the question that the customer has. Maybe we should make that the most important thing, not throwing more and more things at them. And so that idea of being curious instead of emulating others is really what propelled Google to where it's at today. Is just answering one really, really important question: is what is the user trying to find, instead of throwing things at the user. a more kind of small business example, although back then I guess you would call Google kind of a small business. There's a home builder down in Palo Alto that we worked with in the last recession who they would build spec homes. They build a house and they would say, hey, does anybody want to buy this house? And in the recession, they couldn't get funding to build those houses. And so their thought was, well, maybe buyers of homes want to buy a different kind of home. Maybe they want to buy homes that are super energy efficient and cost $0 to operate. And so they, through the recession, figured out how to build a totally different type of house that was powered by solar energy, that had super insulated walls, that were doing all these things that customers at the time weren't actually asking for. Customers were asking for homes. And as the economy started to recover, they could get this message out there of homes that don't cost you anything to operate, that are better for the environment, that are better for your quality of life and health. And suddenly the market was like, oh yeah, that's what I want. I want that, not those other things that everybody else is selling. So both Clarim and Google, as well as other companies that escape commoditization, they question the status quo and they share a vision for what the future could look like. Google shared a vision for what search could look like. Clarim shared a vision for what homes could look like. And they are essentially offering, customers this idea of a meaningful choice, right? It's, the Yahoo search engine experience and the Google search engine experience are radically different approaches. One was giving the customer what they thought the customer was asking for. The other was actually solving a real challenge in a unique and meaningful way that was really visionary. And that result of that, the transformation you can think about for your organizations, is the opportunity to escape commoditization and to actually build tremendous customer loyalty and the bonds between you and your customer. To this day, Google is still the search engine because of the loyalty and the strength of bonds they've built with their customers. Setting aside all the other nefarious stuff they do with our data, it's a good case study in terms of innovation. I'm going to time out here for just a second and see, if you guys want to throw any questions to Rose through the chat window. Have you gotten anything, Rose?
No questions yet.
Okay.
But yeah, does anyone have any to shout out?
Yeah. I think I saw a hand sort of go up for a second. You could ask in real time too if you want. Okay, I'll keep going. If it comes up, fire it at Rose and we'll get it in the next break.
Sounds good.
Okay, so wicked problem number 2, the disengaged workforce. We're gonna see a shift in this, obviously. You're gonna have a lot of people desperate for work. I had somebody say to me recently, and it just caused me to kind of shake my head. Their employees were frustrated because of the number of hours they were having to work, and he was like, well, they're lucky to have a job. I was like, all right, let's sort of rethink how you're approaching this here, right? We're lucky to all have each other. How about that as a starting point of how to think about employees? But prior to this downturn, there was a lot of this conversation, right? People will move for $1 more per hour, that they'll leave your job because they want to make some more money elsewhere. And so the idea is, what if we could shift our mind to think about the idea of purpose, inspiring loyalty, and creativity? And I think this is a great audience who probably connects with a lot of these ideas already, of an engaged workforce and valuing employees. But I want to challenge folks to go beyond just the idea of saying employees are important and I treat them well, to how do I create an engaged workforce that's not only loyal, but is creatively inspired and motivated to help us through this hard time. And that's the next level up that I think a lot of organizations have as an opportunity beyond just an appreciative workforce or a workforce that is thankful for the benefits and other values that B Corps bring, but how do you create that level of engagement with your workforce? I'll use an example here. This is Devin Paolo. He's a steel fabricator out in McMinnville. Devin, he's in an industry where normally employees are thought of as hourly workers, and they're thought of as, tough guys who make things with metal. They're not thought of as people who think about their careers. Many times his competitors will think of their workforce as disposable. You see a lot of turnover in this industry. Devin has the benefit of not coming up through the fabrication world. And so he approaches it from a very, very different perspective, that even though, these jobs are blue collar jobs, whatever that means, that everybody there is worthy of appreciation and career development. And he's invested in that. So when times were good, he was doing things like building a whole new way to look at an org chart. So this is Devin's org chart. That's what I would call the purpose-driven org chart. So at the center is your sense of purpose, your why. The next ring out is how you do the work, and then the what, in terms of what it is you're doing. And you can see what happens is you might start out here as a fabricator, which is the most sort of like do this job kind of role. And as you move up in your responsibilities, say to become a lead fabricator or somebody who's helping to manage other fabricators, now you're actually moving in towards the center of the business and getting closer to its sense of purpose. And so his idea is to take folks from the outside of the sphere and bring them towards the middle, both in terms of their advancement in their careers, but also their awareness of what the purpose is in the organization. And then furthermore, unlike a traditional org chart, which is built on this sort of hierarchical kind of ladder structure, there isn't the idea that you have to stay in one ecosystem. So you could go from being a fabricator to becoming an estimator, or you can go from being an engineer to going to become a fabricator, or from a fabricator to being an engineer. And so all of these ideas, they place a emphasis on purpose and advancement towards purpose, as opposed to role within the business, which is very, very different than most org charts, which take role within business as the most important thing. So if I'm the CEO, I'm at the top of the business. And if I sweep the floors, I'm at the bottom of the business. And that infers that the closer to the top, the more important and valuable you are as a human being, and the closer to the bottom, the less important and valuable you are as a human being. The idea with the purpose-led org chart is that we're all working towards the purpose of the organization, and all of us can move towards that idea. And it doesn't mean that because I'm a CEO that I'm better and more significant and valuable than somebody who's welding metal together all day long. I just happen to be a little bit closer to the sense of purpose, but you too can actually move in that direction. So he's made investments like that. This investment here, which is a cool little scout book. This is an individual growth map that each employee gets when they start at Solid Form, and it's a chart to help them advance towards the purpose of the organization. So individual pages in there talk about their goals in terms of not only their skills development, but also their alignment with the company values. So there might be a page in there that has a question of, how did I live to the company's value of creative problem solving? What's an example of that? And so this would get used in the one-on-one coaching sessions that Devin would have with his employees. And the whole idea here, right, is to create that engaged workforce that solves problems creatively. And when times get hard, that's what you need. You need people to solve problems creatively. And Before everybody jumped in on the call, a few of us were talking about how in some industries you're seeing, Colleen and I were talking about this, like how some industries you're seeing people really respond quickly and creatively with innovation, so 3D printer companies starting to make, safety masks as an example. And then in other industries and businesses, they're just kind of like rolling over and going, I don't know what to do. And I think a lot of that is often a function of whether your team is highly engaged. And these kinds of investments that Devin makes helps foster that idea of engagement and creativity. I think one last example here that I'll show you is, you probably all have seen Dan Price of Gravity Payments. He's the CEO who sort of famously took his $1 million salary down to $70,000 and then gave everybody a minimum wage of $70,000 in Seattle. When he realized that there was so much inequity in the way compensation happened, as well as the cost of living, in an urban center like that. And, his business is super struggling right now because his client base are these small businesses that do credit card transactions. So his revenues are down like 50% overnight. They're continuing to plummet. And, he went to the team and asked them, what are we going to do? And folks raised their hands and said, hey, I will take a pay cut. I'll take this much of a pay cut. I can afford to do it. And they all volunteered at their own level that they could volunteer at. He didn't ask them to do that or prescribe or say, we're all taking a 20% pay cut. They came up with these creative solutions as a team. And I think that those investments he made in the team, years ago of saying, hey, you need to be able to live when you work here. Those are paying dividends for him today. And I really love this idea that when you invest in people, you are engendering trust and loyalty. And I'd layer on that the idea that you're also creating the opportunity to engender creativity, which is going to be in much demand in the coming months. There's some really great stuff. Another HBR article on trust and loyalty. Low trust companies, just do not perform nearly as highly as high trust companies. The high trust companies are like 50% more productive, more energy at work, 100% more energy at work, and so forth. And so I'm always looking for leaders to ask the question of how to create trust and loyalty. And the idea being, we as leaders and owners, we're going to have to ask of our teams. We're going to actually have to ask a lot of our teams in a downturn. And those who enjoy the privilege of asking for our teams to make sacrifices are the ones that they themselves have already given, right? If you're like Dan Price and you've been giving all along, those are the ones who get to ask when the time comes. Whereas if you're a leader who's always been taking and taking and taking, when you go and ask for people to help, it's just not there. The loyalty and the goodwill, it just isn't there when times are hard. And people may do the work in a recession because they know they can't afford to lose a job. But what happens in those low trust companies is when times get better, that's when you see the exodus of all the top performers, because they realize that the commitment to them was transactional. So the foundation of that idea, and not rocket science, is this idea of mission and values and making those authentic and real. I think recessions are a really great time to examine how authentic your mission is. If you're saying, hey, our mission is our team, or our values are team oriented, and yet your behaviors don't line with that, that's going to create a real challenge for you when times are hard. On the other hand, if your vision and values and mission are aligned with supporting people and you're really living that, then it's your chance to be remarkable and your chance to create that loyalty and trust in your team. So this is the idea, right? The transformation for your organization is to create a culture of shared responsibility, inspired commitment, and unlock creativity to solve hard problems. All right, I'm gonna hit this third wicked problem, unless Rose, you have any questions that have come through. Okay, I'm seeing a no. All right. Okay, last one, concentration risk, the 800-pound gorilla, probably one of the hardest problems we see. Even in good times, it's a hard problem to solve. So if you've got a big customer that's providing a big chunk of your revenues, you're looking at a recession and going, oh my gosh, I can't afford to lose them. I need to double down on them. And there's probably some truth to that. Not saying I've got a silver bullet here, but so the default mindset, tends to be that, my old presentation used to say grow. I've updated it, in order to survive, we need to take on more work from this 800-pound gorilla. And the change of mindset that I would encourage you to look at is, what if instead of surviving and serving that one customer or two big customers, what if the idea is, in order to thrive, we need to focus on right fit customers. And this is super hard because oftentimes focusing on right fit customers can mean giving something up. In the last 10 years, many times we've had customers come to us with a wad of money wanting us to do something that wasn't where I wanted to take the company. And it takes a lot of discipline to say no to somebody with a wad of money in order to keep moving your company in the right direction. Not everybody can do it, and sometimes you have to make compromises. We have also taken on clients who are like, look, we need this client right now. Just financially, we've got to make this happen. But we are all very clear that this is an exception and that we're going to get past this and stop making that exception. So a good example, this is such a great example. So it's a little bit of a complex story, but so there's a client that we used to work with down in Tualatin that does commercial HVAC. So think air conditioning, heating, all the ducting stuff. So they do work on all the buildings that are around here. And we helped them get clear on what their mission is, which is this idea of bringing balance to the environment. So not only warm rooms and cool rooms and all those things being in balance, but actually this idea of actually thinking about the environment. And one of the reasons this is so important is that energy use by HVAC equipment, the heating and the cooling and all that, especially on a commercial level, is a massive carbon producer. I mean, it's huge the amount of energy we use to keep our buildings heated and cooled in the summer. And so, once they said, hey, this is our mission, this is what we're going to do, you can't just like, oh, that's a nice tagline. You actually have to think about how you're going to deliver on that. And the owner of the company started thinking from an innovation perspective of the fact that every time they service a cooling unit on the roof of a building, they take out a filter, which is a big filter, and often there's multiple filters, and they replace them with a new filter. And every HVAC company that services every single heating and cooling unit on every single building does the same thing. They take that filter out and they throw it in the trash. Like universally, that's what happens to every single filter that gets pulled out of an HVAC unit. And he was thinking about just that incredible amount of waste that goes into landfills with that. And again, he's everybody has a Makino problem. He's just like all the other HVAC companies, right? They all do the same thing. So he started thinking about these filters, and then he approached a company down in Eugene or Salem that does biomass work. So they take, trees and stumps and all that kind of stuff, and they put them into a furnace, and then they convert the biomass into electricity. And yeah, there's some carbon produced for that. It's not a perfect model, but it's not putting everything in the landfill, which then degrades and produces methane, but they're actually producing electricity. And so working with them, and it took a long time to figure out, but they built a methodology to where they take all of those furnace filters, and now they biomass them and they turn them into electricity. And he's the one who figured it out, and now he's the only one who does it. And so when he goes and talks to a company about being their provider and servicing all of their units, which is a really awesome recurring revenue model, he's got something he's doing that's really, really different. And it's aligned with his mission of bringing balance to the environment. And so when you go to a company like Nike, which has a global environmental and carbon reduction initiative, now he's different than all the other folks who service HVAC equipment. And so in the past, he could have never gotten a client like Nike as a customer. He's just a small business, 30 people, so. But now he has over 9 million square feet of building that he is responsible for the heating and cooling. So that's everything, repairs, upgrades, furnace filter changeouts. And again, none of that would have been possible if he hadn't really thought through what his mission was, what his purpose was, and how does that purpose actually help his customers. So last time I checked in, they recycled over 40,000 filters. That number's way higher now. They're just killing it, in terms of what they do in the space. And it all ties back into their mission. I see there's a chat. Let's see. I'm sorry, the chat window is like this little distraction, but.
Oh, looks like someone had to take off, but they said
okay.
Thanks.
All right. Okay, cool. All right. So I think one of the awesome things about a recession, as terrible as they are, is that it's an opportunity for businesses to stop being meh, right? Like this idea of like, well, we just do the same thing as everybody else. It is an opportunity for you to actually be remarkable and to embrace this idea of yes. And you look at like Reitmeier and how they're doing something totally different than the rest of their industry, and it's exciting. And they're doing other things too, like when they do a full redo of an HVAC system, none of the trash that comes out of that project goes into a landfill. Every piece of that gets recycled, every piece. And that is, they just did it because that's part of their mission. Yeah. So, okay, summing this up. So this idea of, instead of selling to everybody, finding right fit customers that bring you the kind of work that is going to make you exceptional. Great example with Reitmeier. Right fit customers will also then refer right fit leads to you. So Nike was the foot in the door, and now Jeff is getting calls from Google and all these other large corporations who actually have environmental initiatives around HVAC. He hasn't figured out how to service clients down in California, but he's starting to look at like, okay, how do I build some kind of a system? Because they want him to take all of their filters systems. So now they're getting business that's just naturally coming to them because they're exceptional. And then finally, right fit customers simplify the sales process. In fact, he's having to turn people away because he literally can't answer that much demand. So here's the transformation, build relationships with right fit clients, diversifying your base, and, eliminate the friction of wrong fit customers, that are always more demanding. One of the things that's a hard decision to make for me as a leader is if a customer comes in the door and there's a lot of red flags, at some point I have to ask the question, is this customer going to be so hard on my team that they can't go the distance? Because it doesn't help if I bring in some revenue, but yet you destroy the team who's doing the work for all the other good customers you have. And that's a tough one. I don't pretend to be, perfect at it every time, but that's something I think about a lot. So last little piece here, I added this in light of current situation. So, the stuff all preceding this, the idea was, what kind of question can I ask myself to shift my mind of how I can run the business and how I can be strategic. And so I think this idea now more than ever is more important. It's really a question of innovation and strategy. And so what questions can you ask of your business that can help you navigate the future? And I'll just show you a few examples I found that I think are really inspiring. So this is 10 Barrel Brewing. The other day I saw on my Instagram feed, they're now selling kegs direct to, and maybe they've been doing this all along, but now they're really pushing hard on selling kegs direct to homeowners, consumers, because they can't sell their product through brew pubs anymore, right? So now they're saying, hey, we've got a drive-by service, come pick it up, pay in advance, pick it up. They're looking at different ways to package their product to get it out there in different ways. They're being innovative and moving really fast as opposed to panicking and being paralyzed. Similarly, this is a really cool story. This is a brewery down in Arizona. And the reason I know about this story is we have a client that sells kegs, and you can imagine how, devastating it is to their business, right? If I sell kegs to brewers and brewers can't get their product into brew pubs, it's a problem, right? So this brewery has figured out how to convert their operation to producing sanitizer. So now all these kegs here are filled with hand sanitizer, and they're being delivered to a hospital. I mean, that's fucking awesome. Pardon my language there, but to be able to go from we make beer to, we're gonna solve a problem, and we're gonna actually help with a larger problem, which is, clean hands and hospital workers who can't get enough sanitizer. So, they did this in a matter of weeks. And what I really admire about our client who sells the kegs is part of their strategy was to reach out to all of their customers who are brewing beer and say, hey, look at this model over here. Maybe this can apply to your business, right? And if their clients who are breweries start to be able to produce sanitizer and can get it out there, that means they need more kegs, which helps my client, right? And so you think about this ecosystem and how customers of customers can support backwards. That's the kind of creativity that we need today. Two more examples. So this is a company that does big sheet metal projects and HVAC. For some reason, I love HVAC. So, but much larger scale than Reitmeier, huge projects. And, a simple thing they've done is recognizing that a lot of the projects they had on the books, which are schools, they can move them forward. So they can be doing them now instead of waiting for summer when school's out and they have to navigate around kids and teachers and all that sort of stuff. So the schools are closed. Hey, we can get started on those projects right away. The budgets for those projects have already been allocated. So while some of their work might be going down because private money might pull back, public money has still been allocated. And so they're being creative about how they go to different customers and rejiggering the project flow. Last one, let's do a time check here. We have this client that does retail displays, and oh my gosh, what a tough business to be in right now, right? Nobody's going to retail stores really. But what's cool is if you make retail displays, you can make all kinds of stuff. You can make stuff with wood and plastic and metal, and you can fold things, build boxes. So this is an example of a retail display. My client didn't make this, but it's a good example, right? It's got pieces and parts put together. And they realized, what? We can work with plexiglass really effectively. We've got all the tools and supply chain to make that happen. And so now they're building sneeze guards. you know, they're going to be selling these to all kinds of folks, you know, medical offices, restaurants. You think about, you know, gosh, all those like quickie marts, like 7-Eleven and so forth. Like their workers are actually kind of frontline hazard workers. They need some protection, and you're starting to see these things, but a lot of them are real janky. And so, you know, this client, they're like thinking, you know, how can I be innovative? How can I have a turnkey solution that can ship easily and flat and be customized for the need? So those are, you know, those ideas, all those folks thinking big like that. I think all of us are going to have to do that. Okay, I got a little bit more at the end, just a tiny little bit, but this is my formal Q&A session here that I'll open up.
I haven't gotten any questions in the chat yet, so everyone feel free to just ask your questions out loud now, if you have any.
I'm going to just start calling on people.
I have a question.
Yeah, Kayla.
Sort of maybe slightly also a comment. Something that I've been thinking a lot about, and there's a few of us who are on a B Local leaders call this morning with folks from the B Corp community all around the country and Canada, is just kind of this concept that, you know, we hear a lot of talk about getting back to normal, and what does normal mean, and actually in reality I think that's maybe not the best way to think about it. Maybe normal, what we used to know, is something that we should kind of try to reimagine, and maybe not go back to normal. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts about like how businesses can approach their thoughts about moving through a recession, but maybe not actually getting back to the way things used to be. I think you kind of gave some examples around like different innovations and kind of shifting business, but like if you're like, you have your core thing and you can only do so much, like, are there any other like things that you can think of that might help us kind of push, especially as a B Corp community, away from returning to normal and push towards kind of moving forward and reimagining what our economy might look like?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, that's a great question. So here's a silver lining to this whole thing, is that it exposes a lot of the problems that are out there. Like, you know, I was listening to a really wonderful podcast from a very thoughtful leader, runs an organization called Robin Hood. I mean, just right there, you're like, oh, I like them already. And he was just talking about how this idea of, let's just take the, you know, poverty line, right? Like if you're above the poverty line, you're fine. If you're below the poverty line, you're in trouble, right? And how kind of misguided that can be in terms of the struggles that so many people face. And, you know, this is just exposing it like nobody's business. I mean, you know, you've got such a lack of durability in the model that was before. So I think you're spot on in that. I don't want to return to that. I mean, it's super fragile, right? I mean, one little virus, it just like wipes us out. So I guess I guess in some ways it's sort of like, what can I control and what can't I control? Like, I can't control larger macroeconomic forces, you know, in a huge way. I probably can't control capitalism too much. But I can control how we're responding. And some of the things that I've found to be really helpful is increasing the frequency of engagement. So, you know, we used to meet once a week as a team, as a kind of a huddle, and then we'd have lunch on Fridays. And now we're, you know, every day at 10 o'clock, we're on a Zoom call. We're increasing our frequency of conversations with our clients. I mean, we're probably working harder now than we ever have in a lot of respects. And I don't think that's unique to us. I know a lot of people here probably are. It's like working harder for less money than ever. But I do think one of the things that's pretty awesome and thinking about what could be in the future is that a lot of the bullshit of business has been washed away like super fast. Just take, for example, little kids running around in the background, or, having to wear professional clothes and all this kind of stuff. It's like there's a new sort of reality that's being established for how we live and work. And I see it in conversations I have with folks that aren't clients or aren't employees, just like, folks like you or folks that are interested in working with us. Like, the first question tends to be, how are you doing? Not like, what's going on, or, like, oh, the weather's nice, let's talk about that, kind of thing. So I think there's a level of authenticity that's being introduced. And like, why do we need to stop that? I think about that, and how I've approached our conversations on LinkedIn is a good example. I've gone pretty hard at that ecosystem because I've got a lot of connections, and I feel like I can start a really good conversation there. And I'm just seeing, a lot of positive mind shift going on there. So that's the best I can answer. It's like, what can I control? What can I do? More frequency, more engagement, more authenticity, empathy, all those things. Like, why abandon those, when things get back to normal? As if like there's a moment where we'll be like, we're at normal again.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great question, Kel.
We had a couple of comments in the chat. One from Matthew Gibbs sharing an article about mastering motivation, kind of aligning with your points on loyalty and trust. So thanks, Matthew. And then Shay commenting, being really inspired by this. And if those interested in the larger conversation, Jennifer Amberst has a feminine economy and Instagram handle there for people to follow if they're interested in more on that.
Cool. Great. Okay, last thing I thought I would leave y'all with, trying to break my guys habit, so bear with me. It's y'all. And I got to thank my coworker Lauren, who is from Texas, and she uses y'all like it's nobody's business. So maybe Lauren, could you unmute and just like say some y'all in Texan for me?
Hey y'all.
Thank you.
It's great.
Awesome, appreciate that. Okay, so the one last thing. After the last recession, I wrote a book called Marketing from the Inside Out. And even though it has the title marketing in it, it really is a book about building a purpose-led business and how to build something that's durable and vibrant based on mission, vision, and values. Did this, I think, wrote this before we became a B Corp, but a lot of it is going to seem very relevant to y'all in terms of how you work. So Lauren, actually, I don't even want to take credit for this. Lauren has been looking into like, how do we give this away to people? Because I really am a big believer that how we behave under times of duress informs how people will see us when things are less stressful. And so Amazon won't let us give away the print book for free, although they will let us reduce its price basically to the costs. So we're gonna open up a window of time where we just reduce the price to our cost, and then they also allow us to do a promotion where we give away the Kindle version for $0. So it's a limited time that we can do that for. And what I'm going to do is make that available to this group here. I'm also giving another talk in, is it a week, Lauren? I don't know, a week and a half or so.
The last week in April, yeah.
Last week in April. So I want to make that offer to them as well. So I'm going to open up a window at the end of April where it'll be free on Kindle and it'll be cost for print if you want to order it for print. So if you're interested in that, I'm happy to give that away to everyone. Just shoot me an email, and Lauren and I'll make sure that you're send a note when that's ready to go. So it'll be the end of April when we open that up. I mean, certainly you're welcome to buy it at full price, whatever, but I never wrote this book to make money on it in the first place. I just wrote it, I really wrote it for the businesses that were purpose-led, and especially ones that are in that kind of $1 million range where they needed to DIY a lot of stuff that Kinesis does. And so I just kind of get this thing out like crazy. So there's some marketing stuff in there for sure, but it's really more of like the holistic, thinking about the business on a holistic level. And so I'm happy to give it to you folks. So with that, that's all I got. So hopefully this has been helpful. I appreciate you all showing up in the midst of a crazy time and making time to have a discussion. And if you want to continue the discussion, you've got my email address right there. And Rose is going to send out this recording and with the presentation. So if you want to go back and look at stuff that's in here. Also, if you want any of the research that I've got, just shoot me an email and I'll send it over to you. I don't have it right here in front of me, otherwise I'd throw it in the chat window, and I can do that too. Cool. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Shawn. We really appreciate, the offer for the book and you spending your time sharing with us today. Thank you everyone for coming. Just a couple quick announcements before we let you go. We have an event next week on Thursday from 12 to 1 p.m. It's about sustainable development goals and the SDG manager on the BIA. So join us next week for that. And I put a couple links in the chat as well, how to sign up for our newsletter, if you have questions and if you have any ideas or you want to speak at one of these learning events. We'll be doing them digitally for the next little while. So just let us know if you have any ideas. And again, thank you, Shawn, and thank you everyone for coming today.
Thanks, Shawn. Great session.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Shawn.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you.
Well, everyone have a great rest of your day.
All right.
Hey, y'all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.